idea of the public, you received the Young Australian of the Year award.
Yeah.
Congratulations
Thank
again.
you.
How do you see these skills are taught through the education curriculum, through secondary and tertiary education?
When I'm talking about like advanced algebra and figuring out how many degrees are in a triangle, I just don't see how I would use that in my everyday life.
It's because when you are not for profit and you are always at the door of the government to receive money or
Yeah.
ask for money, you're always dependent. You're not innovative enough. So how do you bring that mindset there?
Yeah, like a people perspective. Oh, I'll just give a couple of hours a week and then I'll do it on the side of my day job. Paying nothing for people to I've got to pay a full salary is such a massive leap.
From here can go two pathways. One is Swifty and one is, keeping the line.
Always Swift. So what people should be focusing on is learning how to learn.
You are a champion of statements. Learning how to learn.
Yeah.
Giving us 2 or 3 mantras which you believe in or Welcome, Kate. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Thank you for the time today, and would like to know. There's a long story, and you keep on showing on the feed all the time, every time, on LinkedIn feed, to be precise, and want to know more. And I was very intrigued what you're doing. Please tell your story in as expansive way as you want to.
Yeah, thank you. So it's funny actually. I was on a call with someone the other day. And she was like, "Oh, Kate, I see you on my LinkedIn all the time." And the other person on the call was like, "I don't post." She's like, "Oh no, I meant Kate. I'm very active." And what you've probably seen is lots of pink and purple, lots of bright colours, and bringing the energy is what I like to do. So my story actually started back when I was 21. And I just joined Space Cubed, the co-working space. And I had no background in technology or entrepreneurship. My background at the time was events. I'd come from running charity events for multiple sclerosis WA, and was moving into this kind of corporate innovations event space. And I got really curious about what was happening in technology. Didn't know anything about computers and coding and entrepreneurship, and I just wanted to understand more. So I went along to everything, and then I started trying to teach myself how to code, following online tutorials, and I found that there was a point where I got stuck, and I was like, how do I get to that next little step further? And the communities that existed weren't very beginner friendly, weren't very female friendly. So yes, ran the first workshop, which at the time we were Perth Web Girls. And now it's been just over 10 years that we've been running workshops and events, trying to teach women how to code, but also just trying to change the perception of what tech is, that you don't have to be like a guy in a hoodie in a basement to do well in tech. You can be feminine, you can be glittery and sparkly and fun and feminine, and whatever you want to be, there is a role for you in the technology and startup space. So just trying to tell that message. And then last year I was very privileged to win a Young Australian of the Year award, and have since been able to talk on a national stage about what we're doing in that space, but also speak to lots of young people about the future of technology and innovation, and giving them the hope and inspiration for the future.
Lovely. Wow. That's a lot of achievements on the side. But could you tell me the backstory behind Kate and what made Kate and your growing up, and how has your purpose developed, and this the keen sense of finding a challenge and then focusing on that and then going around finding solutions around it. So you started an events person, but before that, how has your purpose developed?
Yeah, so I'm a country girl. So I was born up in Karratha, then we moved to Kalgoorlie, in Perth for a little while, and then I did most of my growing up down in southwest in Bunbury. And Australind, actually, to be precise. And so I went to a very, very big high school. So we had 1,400 kids in my high school. And I did very well academically, but I moved in the middle of high school up to Perth, to a private girls' school, and I was kind of like the middle of the pack when I was used to being doing quite well academically, and I wasn't like a lot of the girls that I went to school with. So that feeling of not being sure where I fit in and trying to find my place, I think that was a real through line that when I got to starting my business and the work that I do of building communities, that feeling of, oh, I know what that feels like to not feel like I'm part of something and wanting to be part of something was really important to me. And I know that my whole life, I've just wanted to make a difference. So my key values are making a difference, its people and its purpose. And in every job that I've ever done is how do I make an impact and build a legacy and have a real, make a difference in someone's life. And when I was in high school, I thought that might be through politics. Then I went into the charity space, and now I'm doing it through technology. But it's that idea of how can we change the world? And I think all of us can change the world in some way if we kind of push through and have that vision of what does my role look like in making that happen, rather than kind of just giving up of, oh, well, it's somebody else's problem to change the world. I think it's everyone's problem to change the world.
And how is that the idea of that I want to do my bit of changing the world, and where it comes from, where does it stems from?
I think I'm very aware of the privilege that I have. So even though I'm in some ways, I guess, of minority in the tech space, there's not a lot of women. And I'm from regional Western Australia. There's a lot of boxes that you could tick, but I'm still very much I recognize the place of privilege that I have. And I know that there are a lot of people who haven't been given the opportunities that I have. And I think about that really seriously, about how can I extend that to lift people up. And I think the family that I've been raised in, my parents had very non-traditional pathways and jobs. My dad used to drive bin trucks. Then he worked working for the mines department in safety. And I saw him kind of work his way up through government as a public servant. That kind of idea of how do we make the world safer and how do we, save lives through making sure that people have safe work practices. I think I've seen that demonstrated lots and lots of times in different ways. And for me, it was quite clear that we all have, even in small ways, a part to play in the world that we build. If it's the jobs that we do or the behaviour that we accept, the way that we spend our money, there are so many powerful things that individuals can do to kind of make that change.
In the early years when you started both Web Girls, am I right in saying that? Both Web Girls, yeah. And what was the initial intent of that project to start with? One is, yes, we identified there were not too many girls who were doing coding back then, but what were the intent behind that intent?
So really, in the early days, I just wanted to find people that were like me, that wanted to learn something. And it was really an absolute shoestring that we were running on. So the story that I like to tell, one of the very early workshops we ran as a committee, all volunteers we would have in my living room. Sometimes we would have meetings or in my office, catch-ups. But someone sent an email saying, we'll see you in the morning for breakfast. And we didn't have breakfast ordered. We didn't have a budget for breakfast. So I made 85 savoury muffins the night before because I didn't want 85 women turning up expecting breakfast and to go hungry. So, we just did what we needed. I did what I thought that I needed to do to make it happen and make a really positive experience. But yeah, I think the early days, it was trying to solve a problem for me and it built a community. And the whole way through, I've always said to people that I actually don't care if you get to the end of the day and you're like, I hate this and I never want to do it again, because at least they tried. And that is such a win that they've tried something and now they know that they don't like it, rather than just wondering, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I'm not smart enough, maybe it's all too hard. Like they've given something a go, and that's so powerful. So it's just changing that mindset shift of I can try something, I can experiment, and I can be confident in knowing that I've tried something and it was for me or it wasn't for me, or I've changed an idea of what I'm capable of.
And how do you see that translating that idea into your first batch of attendees or first batch of your colleagues coming through the door?
Yeah, so we've kind of grown over time. So we started doing these one-day workshops, and so I told you that I really want to make a difference in the world, and I really want that impact to be visible. It's quite hard to tell from a one-day workshop where that goes, and people sometimes tell me now, like, oh, I came to that event and that really was a turning point in my life, and now I've done all of this other stuff. And now I work as a software developer. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that at the time? But anyway, they tell me years and years later that it's made an impact on them. But what we've started doing in the last 6 years is a bootcamp program, which is funded by industry. So the women that I work with often don't have to pay anything or not very much to get education to become a software developer. And watching these sort of 15 to 25 women at a time come through a boot camp and seeing where they are at the beginning versus where they are at the end, not just in their technical abilities, but like who they are as people, watching them blossom. I just think that is the coolest thing that I get to see. Watching them do public speaking and just like nail it. And I'm like, you are light and day different to the person you were before, because of you've been given an opportunity. But you've built a community, you get to feel safe and like yourself, and you've got a really exciting pathway ahead of you with the skills that you need to, enter a potentially high-paying career pathway with a lot of opportunity ahead of you. So yeah, watching the women blossom is incredible, and I feel very grateful that I get to be on that journey with them.
In your observation, how do you see the education system, which should be creating people who can get technology jobs, and that should be by definition should not be differentiating amongst boys and girls, and then people should be getting those skills either at the school or the university degrees. So how do you see the education system playing in that space where you are playing very strongly?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting. There are a bunch of factors that intentionally and unintentionally prevent women from getting into the tech workforce. And it does start really young. So often girls are less encouraged to spend time on things like video games than boys are. And that just builds a bunch of psychological triggers, I guess, between like, oh, I do well in computing, I can do well in tech. And then the language that we're using around, what you can do with tech. I do think that schools perhaps aren't keeping up with the excitement and the possibility. We're still teaching, and it differs wildly school to school, but across the board, not teaching as many exciting, this is the future things. I'm still hearing from my community a lot of the time, people are still saying do accounting or law because they're really safe careers and there's a really clear pathway. But for tech, there isn't as clear a pathway, and that is scary sometimes to parents and teachers who just don't really understand kind of where the world is maybe evolving to. And it's different to the generation that they grew up in. So yeah, there's some very interesting kind of things at play in how we've built our education system. And my other side rant is that, like, I think if I was redefining a system, I would probably start with education. And I think we need to tear the whole thing down and rebuild and start again, because I think there's a lot of structural things in education, but also just we're building people for a workforce that no longer really exists. The setting people up for kind of a way of work that isn't really the reality anymore. which is really challenging. And for our young people, it's very overwhelming that they've been, told that they need to do all of these things, and AI is going to be taking everyone's jobs, and there's a lot of fear around tech. So it can be very easy to kind of unsubscribe from that or stress about it. But what I want to tell people is that it's opportunity and it's exciting, that things are changing all the time, and that's exciting. That doesn't have to be scary.
I want to follow that through in terms of explore that discussion on the education. As you code, you understand two things. One, you need to follow the problem to the solution, and critical thinking. These two skills. And how do you see these skills are taught through the education curriculum, through secondary and tertiary education?
Yeah.
And if there is less of that, how can we add more of it?
Yeah, so I think what I would have really liked to see, it can only speak from my experience, but what I would have really liked to see through my education was solving real problems. I know that I did much better academically when I could see the application of the thing that I'm doing. And the thing that I fall back on all the time is in math class, when I was doing math equations that I could see a place for, I was like, okay, cool. I can see we're talking about compound interest. I can see how that plays out in my life and why I'm going to need that skill. When I'm talking about like advanced algebra and figuring out how many degrees are in a triangle, I just don't see how I would use that in my everyday life. So the more that we can cement problems in reality and target things that are like in local communities, in your community, and give young people real problems to solve, I think that would make a huge impact in how engaged they are and how we can develop some of those kind of critical thinking skills. And the other thing would be the way that we do assessments and how we, track proficiency. That's something that I've grappled with a lot in the boot camp that I run. We don't grade anything, we don't mark anything, because as soon as you start marking things, you start having this like competitive behavior. Are you doing things just for the sake of getting a good mark, or are you doing things to chase the actual learning? And I think they're really important questions that we need to ask. And how do we track skills versus are we just doing this because that's the way that it's always been done, and the easiest way to mark and assess is not necessarily the best way to assess competency and to build skills.
And is it from an assessment point of view, because we assess at the end, and then the difference between the lag indicators and lead indicators, as you would clearly know, that when you assess when something is finished, or as you assessing in an individual, which is very different from the base point where they start from. So you have to see, probably you might see the delta, where they started and where they landed after the curriculum, rather than, what's the final score is. Or do you think the assessment process or the way we assess people has to be rethought to be used as more very individualized assessment process, rather than more of a, have a standard rule?
Yeah, I do. The challenge is that how do you make it scalable and how do you make it fair? And I think that's why we've kind of landed in the system that we have, because it's easy to implement and you can rank people against each other, but I don't think that it's the best way of, teasing out the value of a person and what their future potential is, because at the end of the day, like, a number is just a number. And it doesn't really mean anything, but we're telling young people that their entire life relies on this one number that they get and what university score they get, and their whole life is going to be based on a series of those tiny decisions, when, like, it's not. It's absolutely not. You can do education at any point in your life. So I can see how we've got to there in the education space, but I do think that we need to kind of fundamentally rethink how we manage and how we assess people, and I think that flows through in jobs as well. Like, are resumes the best way of checking if someone's going to be qualified for the job that you're trying to hire for? I don't think they are, but we don't have good, viable, scalable options in our current modern work market either.
How do you see, because tech has got into every system and sectors, and a lot of tech-based solutions to the problems being faced. So there is a lot of opportunity to create technology solutions for many problems there are. And then that leads to the next angle, that how do you create a thriving innovation or startup ecosystem in locally in Perth and in Australia?
Yeah. So my answer is definitely going to be in getting diverse voices in the room. So there's a whole heap of data that diverse teams make better decisions, they're safer, they're more innovative, they're more profitable. Like companies with more women in leadership positions are just better businesses. And there's probably a bunch of reasons for that, but I think that one of the strong reasons for all of those is because having different people in the room means that you have robust discussion and you have conflict, and then you end up with better decisions at the end of it. If you've got a whole heap of people just agreeing, or like, oh yeah, that seems like a great idea, then you're going to build a very narrow focus based on, if you've got a bunch of people who all look the same, they're going to build something that's only really going to fit people that look the same as them or think the same as them. So the more diverse voices we can get in the room, the better. And that's how we build innovation. And then from a how do we grow it in Perth and on a national level, it is particularly here in Perth, we're still seeing access to capital is a really big challenge. There's a lot of people in Perth that have made money on mining and property, but haven't had as many, there's not as much visibility of tech companies, and isn't as much money flowing into tech companies. So we really do need to take a chance on investing in technology and seeing the flow through of that. It's the visibility of role models. So companies like Canva, I think that we should be talking really loudly and proudly about how Canva is West Australian in its foundations. But I don't see a lot of that talked about. And Australia has a tall poppy syndrome problem that we don't like talking about people who are doing really well, but we need to inspire kind of the next generation of people coming through that there is light at the end of the tunnel and that there's opportunity for them. And then the last one is skills development. So making sure that we have skills for our founders, and that might be teaching young people about innovation skills, but also just making sure that our people who are founders know how to be good founders, and then the rest of the team that they need to build. So making sure that we've got people who have the technology skills to build the software, that we've got the people who can hire and grow and scale, and then we've got really strong founders in the room too. So there's a couple of different avenues, but that like money, role models and skilled workforce is going to be really critical for building that.
And then the names you mentioned, like Canva, and they are the extreme end of, people have made the most of the money, and majority of the audience from a probability of distribution point of view will be staying in the middle. Not everybody has to be billionaires. People can be multi-millionaires. Somewhere in between. And then do you see many of those in between, or people who are creating sustainable businesses or startups and founders just jumping the hockey stick and moving much faster rather than the valley of death, just getting stuck there? How do you see that transition from the valley of death to the hockey stick and to the at least being sustainable?
So I think one of the myths is the overnight success. It takes 10 years to become an overnight success, but people only see that, that jump really quickly of like, I didn't hear about them at all, and now I hear about them every day. But that is a really long, slow process. And for most of, the companies that have done really well, it is a lot of really flatlining, nearly giving up, and then having, one moment or a series of moments where things went in the right direction and they've been able to do that hockey stick. So I think we need to tell that story a lot as well, is that it does take 10 plus years to make that reality happen. But I would also love to kind of challenge some of the assumptions of like, do we need to be chasing this capitalist objective of being billionaires is like a lifestyle business that's helping people and solving a real problem, do we need to grow? Do we need to grow for the sake of growing? I get asked this question a lot. People are like, oh, are you going to franchise? Are you going to grow? Are you going to go to overseas? Are you going to do all of these things? And I know that what drives me is that people and purpose. And I love that I know all of my girls on a first name basis. And I'm deeply involved in their lives. And I'm in a WhatsApp group with all of them. And we have this connection that if I was running a multinational business, I wouldn't have the ability to be so connected to the purpose of what I'm doing. And so for me, I'm like, maybe staying smaller and being able to grow my impact in other ways is going to be ultimately what's better for me and what's better for my community, rather than kind of chasing this capitalist objective. So I think we need to normalize some of those conversations, especially in the startup space of, you can grow sustainably, but don't lose sight of the problem that you're trying to solve or why you care about solving it. Because not everyone needs to be or wants to be this like crazy billionaire person.
A name popped in my head, so I just wanted to hold myself there. I think that what you're talking about is essentially the idea of social enterprise. You're running a business for a purpose, and the profit is a means to reach the purpose. And do you see that once you reach a good mass of people you are connected with, and you want to know them from a first name basis, when you lose that idea of, as you grow big enough, that it's too big to everybody on first name basis, so that there could be another Kate created from the group, and there could be there could be multiple groups of these kinds led by people who have similar idea and purpose, rather than being running a whole. I think the first name basis, that it's a good metric to test yourself. That can you remember all the people who you're serving by first name?
Yeah.
That's a good metric to to run a thriving, small, sustainable, and more than that, more happy clientele. So how do you see that the transition of the idea of social enterprise sits with you, and how do you want to explore that thought?
Yeah. I've always been very driven by purpose, and I'm very proud that we're a social enterprise, profit for purpose. I do think that the work that we do, and most of my customers are big corporates. So I work with mining companies, banks, that are trying to get more women into their technical teams, and we're a means of providing the education and the talent for people within those companies and for people who are outside their companies to have a pathway in for them. So what we're solving is a real problem, and that should be paid for. And we are, I guess, almost in some ways an alternative and an add-on to recruitment that is a paid service. So I think it's very important to acknowledge the work that goes into things, but having that purpose at the core of it is really important to me. And what that kind of manifests as, like we said, I want to stay small and know who the people that I'm working with are, but we've also got a target of reaching 100,000 women by 2025.
That's a good memory.
Yeah.
That's a good memory you need to have, 100,000 women.
Yeah. And we've personally taught through our programs about 15,000. But across all the work that we've done, we record it once a year at our impact report. So last September, when I published the metrics, it was about 63,000 is our estimated impact. So I haven't checked in again recently, but somewhere pretty close to 100,000. So we're still making really broad impact, but also still having the depth and the breadth of the work that we do. So I'm personally connected on a deep level to these people, but we can also have an impact that is way wider reaching than that at the same time, just through kind of these different levers that we can pull. And those things keep coming back to me when I make decisions is that getting us closer to that 100,000 that we're trying to target? And is this an opportunity to change lives? And is this something I'm passionate about? And is this a space that I want to swim in? Because not every pool is a pool that I want to swim in. There's lots of pools I don't want to swim in.
Fun.
I've thrown you.
Yes. God, mental images. Coming back to the room. So there are three categories. So you talk. Yours is more of for purpose, for people organization, and there is on the one end of the spectrum is purely for profit. The end game is shareholders, revenue, profit centric, and on the one end extreme other end is not for profit. So they have defined themselves. I'm not for profit, but they could be for purpose, or they are for purpose, and they are for values. So, but from a mindset point of view, you sit in the middle point.
Yeah.
You have both, the best of the both worlds. There's a profit and there is purpose, because hence you can be sustainable.
Yes.
You can do good for longer.
Yes.
You can't just do good today. You can do good for longer. So how do you see that mindset can be brought back on this side? Because there are a lot of charities in Australia, and they've been started 70, 80 years ago by family members, by individuals with a good reason and good deed in mind. And then they're doing good jobs and good and supporting communities in their own ways and formats. So how do you see the next transition of people who have been here in the middle and then done well? How could we create that mindset over this side so that we can bring these people here from rather than always, because when you are not for profit and you are always at the door of the governments to receive money or ask for money, you're always dependent. You're not innovative enough. So how do you bring that mindset there?
Yeah, totally. And this is something that I've seen play out. Like I used to work in the charity space, and the charity that I worked for did have a much more commercially minded team on like how do we make this sustainable. But it's something that I've seen time and time again that people don't think about how they make it sustainable. And even from a resourcing perspective, like a people perspective, something that works when you're small of having like, oh, I'll just give a couple of hours a week and then I'll do it on the side of my day job. But then when you can't do that anymore because you've got work to do, the leap from I'm paying nothing for people to I've got to pay a full salary is such a massive leap that I've seen that play out, that a few places have had to kind of fall over or have someone do it for a while for free and then have to go seek paid work somewhere else because they just can't sustain it. And that really worries me because we don't have this long-term pipeline. We're wasting knowledge, we're wasting energy and the relationships and the brands that have been built and the good work that's being done because we don't have that core of how do we make this sustainable and how do we make this long term. So I would love to see, more not-for-profits thinking about, what is the economics behind it. I'm very passionate that we have volunteers for some of our work, but for the bulk of things that need to happen, I pay people for it. So for our teachers in our programs, it's not a lot of money, but we pay something for it. And if they don't want to be paid, they can donate their fee back into the work that we do so that we can keep, giving opportunities to more and more people. But I recognize that those roles need to be paid for. So I think there's a little bit of a mindset shift that needs to happen of if you are getting resources given for free, or if you're asking people to work for free, then how are we setting that up in a way that when it's unattainable, that you've still got the core people who can do the core work that needs to be done can be paid, and maybe then you've got volunteers to add the sprinkles on the top or the extra little bits on the top rather than making it kind of the core of what happens. So yeah, I think that's the mindset shift, is just thinking about the word sustainability. And I think I probably think about that word at least once a week of like, is this sustainable? I need to play and I need to experiment and I need to try, but I also need to keep coming back to that sustainability perspective.
How do you see that? So I want to stay here in that space because I think the more people we bring, because your initial purpose was to change the world, to have an impact, to leave a legacy, those terms which you used. And I feel people who have founded those charities, those regional communities, or people who have been running those organizations primarily initially on voluntary basis and then,
Yeah.
slowly graduating, I think they are the ones to be supported in terms of the mindset and then growth to move in the lovely center you are in. And what happens sometimes during these, the political cycles of many ministers, they pick up one hero from this story and then throw good amount of money on that hero.
Yeah.
And what happens is that money is used or consumed in the next couple of years, and then we're back to square one. How could those monies be used more efficiently across multiple organizations to make them more sustainable rather than give a good sugar hit?
Yeah.
So those heroes being used for to be on the channel 7, 9, 10, wherever. It's a good news story to give one good money to one organization. I think it's better to train or teach people to be sustainable.
Yeah, and I've always thought of grant money as a way to almost like seed funding something that you're kind of testing something, giving it the legs, getting it going to go find a customer that can keep running with it. And I think I'm very privileged in the space that I worked in. At SpaceCube, that was always our mindset, is how do we use that grant funding to be plant a seed that we can then go spend that time finding a customer that will be able to pick it up and keep running with it. So yeah, I think that is something to keep in mind. It is frustrating, I think, as someone who has been funded for things before, that there is this short-term nature of you get one thing once and then you never see it again. And I would love to see what the framework is for assessing, like, if you did really good work and you got the outcomes that you wanted and you can prove that they were really successful, I feel like there should be more of a conversation about how do we keep that really good work going, rather than like, oh, that was really nice, you did great work, let's go see if somebody else can do really great work, because it feels like we reinvent the wheel a lot of times. So I don't know, I think there's a little bit of a give and a take, that we need to find a sustainable outcome for the work that we're doing, but we also need to be investing in the things that work, and scattergunning random pockets of money all over the place depending on what's politically sexy at the time, I don't think builds a sustainable long-term thing either.
Where do you see in terms of the next round of innovation coming from? What sectors are looking good in the coming years, and then people who are coming into the space of learning technology, what kind of skills they should put their hands on?
Yeah, so I'll do the skills part first, because that's something that I'm really passionate about. People ask me all the time, like, should I be learning Python or should I be learning JavaScript? I think that what people should be focusing on is learning how to learn and being curious and solving problems.
You are a champion of statements. Learning how to learn.
Yeah, but we do this learning in school and then we kind of feel like we never need to learn again. But being curious enough to kind of pick something up and try things, and we're constantly learning stuff, but getting them that habit of, I'm going to try and learn a new skill or a new trick, or watch a webinar or something that I think is really fascinating and just seeing what I can learn from it, and having that curiosity, that's going to be really, really critical for these jobs of the future, because things are moving so quickly. You could invest all of your time in doing one thing and that may or may not pay off, but learning how to learn and learning how to be curious is going to keep going across your whole career. So that's what I would be encouraging young people to do. In terms of where innovation is going to come from, we're obviously seeing massive shifts in what's happening in AI, for better and for worse. I think there's some really cool stuff that's happening in AI. I've also seen a lot of things that we seem to be asking, can I, not should I do this with AI? And I think that we need to ask, should I, more often? Because I've seen I was reading a news article that there's a radio station that replaced the announcer with an Asian woman, and she's like the only woman on any of the network. And feels like they've just ticked a box of like, oh, we've got an Asian woman presenter and she's not even real.
Wow.
That feels a little like, really? Is this the solution to diversity? Just replace it with an AI presenter? That's crazy. I think a lot of what's happening in the image generation and video generation space could be quite exciting, but I think has a lot of potential to be used really harmfully and distort what's real and what's not real and how much trust we have with what we're consuming online. But anyway, AI has a massive explosion, so people who are working in that space, I think, are going to ride a really interesting wave for a couple of years and probably do quite well from it. We're also seeing a big shift in data. I've heard lots of sexy lines like data is the new gold. But the way that we process the huge amounts of data that are being received on us in everything that we do, the way that we act online and our shopping habits, all of this data is going to be able to give companies very interesting insights. And so there'll be a lot of kind of big data plays coming out in the future as well. And then I think there's some interesting things that we can do in education, in finance as well. I think there's no end of potential as long as we're solving actual problems that need to be solved and keep coming back to that question of like, am I actually solving a problem or am I just doing something that's cool because it's cool?
I think there's a big conversation to be had on AI and ethics.
Yeah.
I think I want your views. How do you see? There's a lot of AI tools created to, no need to have a girlfriend, have an AI partner, interact with this person as human as you can be. So what do you see about those apps and technologies coming through the door?
Yeah, well, I think this is a question of like the can I versus should I, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that's being created because it's cool, but is it actually kind of solving that problem? One of the things I saw quite worrying recently was a debate talking about AI therapists, and the for column was yes, but it's more accessible because it's cheaper, and people who are in regional areas can access this therapist if they don't have someone who's trained in their local area. But the flip side of it is, are they trained as an actual therapist, and you don't have the confidentiality that you would have with a live proper therapist. An AI likes to tell you what you want to hear. Is that actually going to be fixing problems and giving people the therapeutic benefits, or is it just reinforcing a bunch of things that possibly bad behavior or thought processes that they already had? So I think that's quite worrying when we're looking at, but you can do it. And there's a couple of things in the for column, but we don't have a bunch of the regulatory frameworks around it because our lawmakers, for the better part, don't understand how this technology works, and because things are changing so quickly, it's hard to keep up when Parliament takes a long time, and it should. I don't think we should be switching through underthought policy, but if new apps and things are being developed on a daily, weekly basis, our law system can't keep up with that. So that's going to be very interesting in that ethics space.
How might you replace a conversation which is done in flesh? Sitting in person, having this conversation. I don't know whether for me it could be replaced, but one of the key negatives about the highly excessive use of social media was excluding or social exclusion for people, and which leads to anxiety and other things, all mental health challenges from there. But now if they are therapists, if they are friends who are online, which are false friends, and would that add to the more of social exclusions and adding more mental health issues to be being mushroomed?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, like I work with therapists and coaches online that are not, in my area. And that can be really beneficial because you can access wisdom from all over the world, but it still needs to be in the right context, with the right guidelines and guardrails and things around it that you can trust and be trusted. And I think that's very different from having an AI where we don't really know where our data goes, and it isn't, doesn't have any of those guardrails on it to make sure that the advice that it's giving is good and sound. And yeah, I think there is still a lot of benefit for having people in person.
Yeah.
I've pushed, it would be much easier if I ran my company having all of my programs totally virtual. It would save a lot of time, it would save a lot of money, and widen the pool that I can work with. But when you're learning a new skill, trust and psychological safety are critical. And when you're changing mindsets, having a place where people feel like they can ask questions openly and freely is really important. So I've made the choice that most of what we do is in person, and we get a bunch of people in the same room and we play Taylor Swift and we have a bunch of things that are glittery and sparkly and we serve people cupcakes, and having those moments that you can share and experience together reinforces that trust and psychological safety and helps change your mindset of this is really scary to over this can be really fun. So in this push to digital, I think that we need to stop in some ways and think, how do we make sure that we have a really positive real life experience that is enhanced by a digital experience, not replaced by a digital experience?
From here can go two pathways. One is Swifty and one is, keeping the line.
Always Swift.
So, but bringing it back from there, when you initially introduced yourself and talked about yourself, you used the word that you know your privilege, what you are and what you have,
Yeah.
and then you are aware of it, and then you are trying to think about it and then be more conscious of what you're doing with it. So I want you to explore that thought with me and elaborate on that idea of what privilege do you have first of all, and where do you see, how do you think about it?
Yeah. So yeah, I know that I come from I'm from a middle class family. We've never had, I can think of a moment in my life where we were, felt really financially scarce, but for the most of my life, financial security has been okay. I went to a very good school. I was a scholarship kid. I worked really hard to be there on scholarship, but I still had the privilege of a really good education. I have a family that are very supportive, and my brother is honestly the best person ever. I love him more than the sun, and I really love sunshine. But I'm very privileged that I have that, family around me and that support network. And I have very good friends as well. We've got, so I was saying to you offline when we were chatting before, but I have a podcast called The Raft of Bitches, which is based on a concept that women shouldn't be like queen bees tearing each other down. They should be like otters, because otters hold hands when they're sleeping, making a little raft. And my raft of bitches, the women that keep me afloat, have really kept me afloat over, particularly being a founder, they've really kept me afloat through that whole process. And I feel very privileged that I have access to that raft, because not everyone has a support network as strong as the one that I have. But I think all that we can do as citizens is, be good ancestors, the people behind us, and to uplift the people that can't uplift themselves. And I think that should be all of our purpose, is how do we provide opportunities to other people? How do we even the playing field as much as possible? This is why I struggle with things like capitalism, because should it be about like making money and me doing really well if it's at the expense of somebody else doing really poorly? I don't think that it should be. I think that the privilege that I've been given and the education that I've been given, the opportunities that I've been given and the support that I have, I want to keep another little otter floating.
Lovely. Very positive on the idea of privilege, to have people around you and supporting. And not everybody has that social network and a support
Totally.
system. In this day and age, as we are connected and disconnected at the same time, how do you create those social networks and then create those opportunities that people can come together when we
Yeah.
are distancing ourselves?
Yeah. So I'm very passionate about the power of community. I definitely have communities, and not every community is right for every person. I think some people think that they should be able to, go to a meetup group or a thing that interests them and feel like they fit in every space, and you're not going to fit in every space. So it is a bit of trial and error of figuring out what communities suit you. But community is everywhere. So it's in the sports that we play. It might be, your church group or whatever faith you identify with. There is community there. There's communities around different skills. So in the tech space, we've got a Python meetup. We've got a WordPress meetup. You might have people there that you can connect with over a shared love or shared topic. I am a hula hooper. And amongst all of the random things that I do, but I have my hoop troupe, which are the girls that I do circus stuff with and play and laugh. So there are communities everywhere. I think what we're not very good at as people is recognizing when we need to ask for help and letting people in. And letting people in requires vulnerability and trust. And so I know that as a community builder, I have to give a lot of myself if I want to get, that reciprocated back to me. So I share a lot with my community about, the things that are going well, but the things that are not going well. And I know them all personally because I spend that time to invest in those relationships to get to know people really personally. So it is a little bit of a two-way street of how you build community. You do need to kind of give, but also recognizing that there are places everywhere that you might be able to meet people if you go in with that open, curious mindset, and that how can I help you and support you along your journey, and not expecting anything from it, but that kind of radical generosity of your time and your space and your love, and maybe that might go somewhere and maybe it not, but.
In the idea of the public victories, you received the Young Australian of the Year award.
Yeah.
Congratulations
Thank
again.
you.
People see the victory. People haven't seen the tears and the pains
Oh,
on the journey. So behind that public victory and all the, the style and all the fun and frolic and all the good things about it, what was the turning moment in your victory which made you on the journey, as in what was the painful part of it?
Yeah, so that was such a whirlwind. So I found out in November 2023, and 2023 was a really hard year for me. Like, I'd had a lot of personal changes in my life. Had left a relationship I'd been in for a long time. I was feeling really burnt out. After COVID, my health wasn't very well. There was just lots of personal stuff going on, and it was a really hard year. And I actually took like 2 months off and ran away to Europe for a little while of just like, I just need to be Kate and not be Kate from She Codes and not be the person on LinkedIn. I just need to find out who Kate is for like a hot minute. So I'd kind of been on a little bit of that journey that year. And I honestly was very close to giving it all up of like, maybe this isn't it for me anymore. Maybe there's somewhere else that I want to go with my life, and I'm struggling a little bit with the roles that I had. I was still working for Space Cubed and doing a bunch of roles there, plus doing She Codes as part of that. And something kind of had to give, and it really was, I was in the middle of all of these decisions when I found out that I received the Young Australian of the Year award, and I was like, oh no, but I haven't figured out what I'm doing with my life. So having to record, and like 24 hours after I got named as the WA winner, we had to record a clip for the ABC of a video interview with like hair and makeup and lighting and getting asked hard questions. And some of it was being used for the national judging, but we didn't know how much. We had zero preparation for it, and it was like the day after the awards. That was really hard because I'm like, I haven't even processed the thing that just happened. People are still texting me various congratulatory things, and I haven't spent the time processing that. And now I'm here talking on camera, pretending like I have any idea what's going on. So that was interesting. And then ultimately I made the decision that something had to give in my life, and I left the job that I had, spun out She Codes as a new entity, and so we're a new legal structure from January. So heading into the national awards at the end of January, I was like 3.5 weeks into essentially running a new business. Was still trying to set up my new systems. All of my systems were similar but different. There was just a lot of really painful admin stuff that had to happen. But publicly, you've got to be like, hey, I've got this. Look at me. When behind the scenes, your little duck legs are like scrambling, just trying to kind of tread water and keep up, and figure out what a new era looks like. So that was really hard. I remember replying to lots of emails at midnight, 1 a.m. In Canberra, when we do the award stuff during the day, like meet the Prime Minister at morning tea, and then come home and email my insurance company at 1 a.m. about my insurance policy that needs to be set up. Like weird stuff like that, but that's just how it had to happen. So yeah, lots of really hard moments from a admin perspective and a time perspective that happened in amongst it. But I'm very grateful for the network that I got to build and the honor that I received. And there's been lots of really good things from that. And I think without the award, would I have kept going? I'm not sure. Probably, but I'm not sure. That really was a big factor in giving me the vote of confidence from the world that like, actually, yeah, Kate, you should do this and you can do this and the world wants you to do this. And the nation is looking at you to keep doing this. It's really big, powerful indicator, which was really exciting, but terrifying at the same time.
Wow. I wanted to conclude your story by giving us, at least 2 or 3 mantras which you believe in, or philosophies you believe in, so that people can get away with something tangible out of it.
So I have a neon sign in my living room that says, always bring the sparkle. That's what I live by. Is what I think that I can bring to the world is the energy and enthusiasm and excitement that I have for honestly just about everything. But bring that sparkle, and sometimes it's literal glitter, sparkly stuff, because that can uplift other people's mood, and sometimes it's just the personality and the energy that I bring to something. But if I'm doing something, I'm going to do it 100%. So always bring the sparkle. It never hurts to ask. The worst that someone can say is no. And even if it's no, it's usually just not right now. So you can ask again. You can ask in whatever time period makes sense, but maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months. No is not a door that's closed forever. You can just keep being persistent and keep asking. And most people don't mind if you do that. And the best case scenario is someone says yes, and then you got the thing that you wanted. Amazing. So it never hurts to ask. And the last I think I'm going to say is find your raft, and hold on to that raft, because there'll be the people that you need that will keep you floating, and you need them close by you, especially if you're going to do hard things. And we're all doing hard things all the time. But the people that are going to keep you floating are going to make the hard things a little bit easier.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.